Hello there, I'm Debbie Shields from Aspen People, and as you know, we do quite a lot of work in the third sector, public sector, and the general kind of not-for-profit space. Quite often we're approached by people who come from a more corporate or private sector background, looking to make the transfer over into the non-profit space. And I thought it'd be quite useful to talk to someone who's done that in the last couple of years that we've worked with. And I'd like to welcome Lindsey Ross, the People Director at Historic Environment Scotland. Lindsey, thanks so much for joining us.
Hi there, thank you.
Hello, and I think it's a really interesting move that you made from the banking sector, you're really corporate, massive organisation, to working with Historic Environment Scotland in the NDPB world. Obviously, huge organisation, and it covers not just a lot of people, but a massive geographic space as well. And it'd be useful, I guess, to just kind of hear your story of doing that, really, and kind of what your thoughts have been. So it's been a couple of years now, hasn't it, since you were in post?
Yes, so I, having spent about 16 years in banking in the private sector, I about 2 years ago moved into Historic Environment Scotland. So I've had so I've transitioned into the public sector at the same time as managing a pandemic, which has been interesting. But overall, I've absolutely not looked back. It has been a great opportunity to move in, and I think when I was making the move, I probably had quite a lot of misconceptions about what the public sector was like compared to the private sector. So I thought it was more probably slower paced. I probably thought it was not as pressurized an environment to work in, and just that kind of, not easier going, but I just assumed public sector, private sector be different. And actually, on coming in, I don't think that's the case at all. I really enjoy the private sector and banking, and I actually also really enjoy this environment. And I think it's really important that you to have a mix of people, and I really encourage people to make the shift, because you can just see things through different lenses. And I think that the public sector in general is probably not as far advanced, particularly on the digital agenda, with the private sector is, but that creates huge opportunity, because there's so much ground to catch up on, and there's so much ambition in the certainly Historic Environment Scotland. I think regardless of the sector, it's all about the people, and that's the bit. And I think to be able to really identify with the purpose of the organisation has made a huge difference. And actually, therefore, the pressure that you put on yourself can sometimes largely be from yourself, because you really are driven to make a difference. And particularly being in the People Director in Historic Environment Scotland, you feel that you really can make a difference to people's experiences of work, and that's what drives. And that's probably what creates the pressure to want to make it better, and to create a better working environment here. I think there probably is a slower pace, but it's equally, sometimes it can be crazily busy, and there's more job security as a fact of being part of Scottish Government. There is more job security, but equally people are really driven to just do a good job. I think regardless, I would really encourage people to move into the public sector, and and moving between different sectors. I think that's what's really key, just to have that different lens. And share experiences and develop further.
And if someone that you maybe known from your kind of past life, I guess, in banking, was considering joining a public sector or a third sector organisation, what would your advice now be that you've kind of gone through that process for them to consider before they kind of made the application?
I think I would say, just, oh gosh, make the move. I think it's more important to understand the organisation that you're moving into. Take some time. There's different mechanics of how things work. So I was very used to having, a kind of a management structure that was the board, and then into shareholders, and it's a totally different world in Scottish government, and there's just different governance structures, and it's public purse, so there's a real importance about value for money, and doing the right thing. So I spend some time navigating how all that works. But again, it's more important to really make sure that the purpose of the organisation is one that can sort of get you up in the morning and feel that you can really add value in. And there's so many opportunities within the public sector to really identify with that.
And I think some people kind of forget that the public sector is such a big, part of society, part of the world.
Yes.
It's not just, government or council. It's, there's so many different things, like there's so many NDPBs now and different kinds of opportunities that can come up as well. So I think you're right. I think people think, well, it's the public sector, it's really slow, and there's, it'll probably be a bit of an easier ride than maybe working for a bank or a large kind of corporate organisation.
But it's absolutely not. It's absolutely not. It's just different. It's just different. And you're driven by the driven by the same things to make a difference and to make it better. So yeah, I would encourage it. I really would. And you see things through a different perspective. The different challenges on public budgets, for instance. It just really brings it to life. It brings it home a lot more, actually.
Yeah. And do you think you do anything differently knowing that you're in an organisation with the public purse attached to it, as opposed to reporting into shareholders, or is it not different in your everyday kind of approach?
I think I get, value for money is as important in the private sector as it is in the public sector. So you're certainly very conscious of ensuring that you are getting your bang for every buck. Would I do anything different? I don't think so, because at the end of the day, we're all people, and that's, people are driven by there's maybe not the incentive. The difference would be is people are not necessarily driven as financially as potentially they are in the private sector, but certainly in a certain environment in Scotland, we're driven to do what's right by Scotland's heritage, and to do a really good job. So yeah, it's equal, really.
Yeah, I think it is. I think some people, a lot of the conversations I have with people who are looking to move over into that kind of non-profit space seem to have a different view of it. So it's good to hear that actually a lot of the stuff you learned or you worked with in the private sector just transfers straight over into, doesn't really matter what sector.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so much value. Yeah, exactly. Still a business, and it's still got to be viable as well and sustainable. So it's just very similar challenges that are faced. And
people, obviously, with you being the people director, people are obviously the biggest part of any organisation or any business, and having that leadership in there at the right level, and maybe coming from a different sector, you bring something new and something fresh that maybe hasn't happened before, or different ideas.
Absolutely, just looking at things through a different lens, the importance of leadership, development, identifying the skills of the future, and making sure that we are able to have pathways in place to develop those. All the same challenges that the private sector have, and yeah, you've got good opportunity and sort of empowerment to make a difference in those things.
Great. Lindsey, thanks so much for joining us today. Hopefully that has answered some questions for people that are maybe thinking about making a move between sectors somehow. And if there's anything else, obviously you can give us a call at Aspen or get in touch with someone on the team.